Well, thank you all for taking some time this afternoon to listen. I'm Frank Wolak. I'm President and CEO of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association based here in Washington. And I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Dolan. Between the two of us, we're going to give you a sort of a snapshot of what is going on in the world of hydrogen advocacy. And hopefully you'll get a better appreciation of what associations are doing behind the scenes and the kinds of factors that we need to be looking at on your behalf as both members and as industry players. The Industry Association, we are the Industry Association for Hydrogen in the United States. We have been advocating for hydrogen for nearly 35 years. For those of you who listened to Sunita Satapal this morning when she asked who's been in the industry for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we could have stood up collectively as the association and been out there when she said nearly 40 years, but that was reserved for individuals. But we are a voice of over 100 strong members, which run a very diverse group of membership comprised of production, distribution, and use of hydrogen. Connor, maybe go to the next slide. Many of the members are familiar logos to you. Many of them are in this room. Many of them are out there in the auditorium and have giving presentations. But our job is to advocate on their behalf and on behalf of the industry to try to move this growing industry and dynamic industry forward. What was this? This is the lead-in. My slides are a little bit out of sequence. What we're going to be basically describing is encapsulated in this slide. And the bottom part of this is if you look from left to right, it really shows the pathway of industry on a timeline. There's early markets, there's planning, there's additional markets, there's growth in production, growth in technologies, and all toward a goal set of 2050 or so and a time horizon. Whereas you heard this morning and you've seen in many publications, there's an expectation of 50 to 60 million metric tons of hydrogen to be used in various forms. You've seen that presented in bar charts. But this bottom picture really shows that there is a timeline of progress from limited participation to growing participation, and many of you see yourselves in that pathway. On top, you look at an association. In many ways, we are following our own pathway, and in many ways, we are pathfinders. Our job is to be looking at the situation way ahead of industry's goals, trying to identify hurdles, trying to identify roadblocks, defining policy actions. And if you look on this timeline, our activities started in 2018, 2019 with an industry roadmap that led into some of the features that came out of the IIJA and the IRA. And now we're in the point of sort of consolidating gains, working on industry factors for Treasury guidance, reducing barriers, and also defining what are those other factors that need to be out in the pathway. We're going to talk about today, we're going to break this into sort of three parts. So in 15 minutes, we're going to try to give you a sense of current activities, what the evolving landscape looks like, and what some of the forward-looking factors are for us. The term on top of advocacy in motion is really appropriate. This entire industry is in motion, and even though we've been around for almost 35 years, the advocacy is growing, it is dynamic, and we are as much in motion as an association as all of you are in your own pathways. I'm going to turn this over to Dolan, and he's going to take a first shot at looking at some of our current areas and give you a sense of what we've been doing.
Thank you. As Frank talked about, we've been around for well over 30 years now as an association. We're going to our predecessors, the U.S. Fuel Cell Council and National Hydrogen Association, that many of you might have been familiar with. A lot of what we do as far as our current effort is internal work, informing our members, keeping them informed on what's going on in Washington or around the country, making sure that they're aware of the various opportunities that are out there. But we also do a lot of external work as well. And one of our longest held priorities has been appropriations work, ensuring that there is advocacy promoting for strong, stable funding for hydrogen programs at the Department of Energy. That has been kind of our bread and butter for many, many years and led us to a lot of credibility in Washington to show that our longevity here. In the last few years in particular, we've been focusing on fulfilling some major initiatives. Of primary focus has been the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, otherwise known as the BIL, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We've been very active in advocating for these major infrastructure programs, including the $9.5 billion for the clean hydrogen initiatives, including $8 billion for regional clean hydrogen hubs around the country, $1 billion for the clean hydrogen electrolyzer program, $500 million for clean hydrogen manufacturing and recycling, and the creation of the first ever national roadmap and strategy for hydrogen here in the United States. Following that, we've also been very active in the IRA, not just on the 45V tax credit that you all are very familiar with, but the broad suite of other clean energy incentives that were part of that package, including those for fuel cell electric vehicles, for commercial heavy-duty vehicles, alternative refueling stations, manufacturing credits, stationary fuel cells, energy storage, and hydrogen storage credits. There's a huge suite of opportunities that were included in those, and we've been very active across all of them. In order to get that accomplished, it required a lot of education, a lot of outreach to working with our membership, building those relationships in the Hill and then with the Washington, D.C. establishment here. As we move ahead, we're continue to be very focused on the guidance rollout for 45V as well as the broad suite of these other tax incentives to make sure that there was workable and usable for industry as intended by these laws. We've also continued to do a lot of education and outreach on the Hill on a number of other emerging areas. Things that are coming down the pike include FAA reauthorization, ensuring that we are advocating for hydrogen and aviation activities, the broad opportunities for hydrogen and application in airports, a big focus and potential opportunity. Surface transportation, including the variety of other funding opportunities for low and zero emission buses, clean heavy-duty vehicles has been a focus, as well as the other proposed hydrogen bills, including the Coons-Cornyn package that have been introduced, the Hydrogen for Ports Act, Hydrogen for Trucks Act, Hydrogen for Industry Act, and FCHEA for hydrogen pipelines. We've been very broadly active across all those. And we've also been focused on regulatory activities. In the last few months, we've seen EPA rulemaking proposed for hydrogen application for natural gas fueled power plants that we've been focusing on engaging with our members on to understand the opportunities there and impact it could have it, as well as permitting reform. As we are increasingly looking at the long-term applications for hydrogen hubs, those 8 to 12 year timeframes that have been established is going to be very arduous. And if we don't only have these first hubs in operation by 2034, we're not going to have been doing our job very well. So finding ways to bring those timelines down and particularly through permitting reform is going to be a very large focus in the coming years. And then finally, we've had a long-standing effort on codes and standards, ensuring that we have a safe regulatory framework to commercialize fuel cell electric vehicles, refueling stations, stationary fuel cells, and the like has been long-standing priorities for ours. Overall, strong policy focus at the federal level is key to advancing industry interest moving forward. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Frank.
Sure. Well, as the last line really implies, so much of the activity in the United States has focused around what the federal government has created. This industry has been around for a number of years, but the catalyst for where we are moving forward in the United States, and this is worldwide, starts with government intervention. And clearly the United States government created a number of policies that counterlisted many of the activities that we're in, and they are growing rapidly and they're causing a lot of activity. So where does that sort of take us beyond our current areas of effort? It takes us into this evolving landscape, and the evolving landscape is not just all of you looking at, where's my next business proposition, what is the outcome of guidance going to be, how do I decide who my partner should be with, but as an association, we're in the middle of that same evolving landscape. What I want to point out with this slide is that those federal policies are causing many of us to have more diverse and wider horizons. We are a US-based entity based here in Washington. We are the National Association in the United States, but our industry is diverse. It is not just the production of electrons or someone who's driving a vehicle. We encompass the entire set of production, distribution, and use. And that means that the issues and priorities are diverse. We have members that range from solar developers, wind developers, electrolyzer manufacturers, industrial gas companies, pipe manufacturers, tank manufacturers, automotive manufacturers, heavy-duty vehicles. They all operate in this ecosystem with very, very diverse needs, and they are growing. So our role as an advocate needs to look at all of their needs and try to put them in packages that can make sense to advocate here in Washington and abroad. But hydrogen is a very, very diverse industry. It's an entire industrial economic ecosystem, not just limited to making ammonia or making hydrogen or making the electrons that go into electrolyzers. The other thing to keep in mind is that our US policies are driving actions and reactions internationally. When the IRA was put together last year, roughly a year ago, over a year ago at this time, it caused somewhat of an international outrage. But what it really created was a bit of a wake-up for many people around the world to realize that they probably weren't doing enough to stimulate hydrogen activities in their own jurisdictions. So the policies that we work on in the U.S. have ramifications externally. And because many of our members are multinational companies, as an association, we really need to be cognizant of what we're doing in the United States that also might have an impact on international activities. So while we're not going to be advocating internationally for what goes on in the EU or in Asia, we need to be thinking about how our members operate in a global economy based around the U.S. policies that we advocate for. And it also means that our focus and priorities need to change. You know, we just have to keep a wide range of knowledge around what's going on internationally. Certification, standardization, codes and standards, exporting of ammonia, exporting of production of SAF. All of those items are beyond the small bubble that we call Washington, D.C. It also means that the federal policies also, well, the second bullet was international. You know, we are an association that has to have sort of a continental reach. What has gone on in Washington has spawned the hydrogen hubs. Those are going to be local activities. States and regional governments are going to be looking at what they might need to do or be interested in doing to complement what the IRA and federal government did. That's going to stimulate a great deal of activity at the local level that might be in aviation, might be in transportation, might just be in the production of hydrogen and incentives. And so as an association, we can't be blind to the activities that are going on around the country and try to work what we can with local partners to assure that there's a bit of harmony across the policies in the U.S. The last bullet, though, is also that as all of these activities go out into the state level and regional level, they are going to come back to Washington. As ideas get generated and groups get formed and topics get thought about in California or Texas or Georgia, some of those same people are going to be looking to Washington for secondary and tertiary levels of advocacy. So we're going to wind up being sort of in the net of a number of new activities that are going to be originated from ideas that aren't in Washington but are going to come back to Washington. And we need to be aware of that. That's all good growth and behavior. But again, as an association, this is an evolving landscape, and policy is, in fact, in motion. I'm going to turn this back over to Connor to talk a little bit about some of the forward-looking factors that we deal with.
Thanks, Frank. You know, I just want to echo a lot of what Frank's saying, but it's important to recognize that we're only as strong as our membership and the ideas that are brought forward to them. You know, we are doing our best as a collective association to understand what the challenges are, what the policy gaps that are existing, and how we can move them forward. But it's incumbent on us working together as a collective. So one of the last things I mentioned on our last slide was on codes and standards. But as we are getting these emerging applications of aviation and maritime, large-scale energy storage, industrial applications, it's going to be incumbent on us to understand what are the codes and standards, the safety needs to accomplish those moving forward. How do we safely refuel these vehicles that are going into the air? How do we work on maritime shipping applications of fuel cells and hydrogen systems? We are also going to be facing a lot of need for international harmonization. Hydrogen certification in particular, is one of the biggest challenges we're going to be facing in the years ahead is looking at 45V in the United States, looking at the Hydrogen Delegated Acts in Europe, looking at all these varieties of certification schemes out there. How do we bring them together? How do we kind of consolidate or at least recognize that other competing schemes out there so that we can be participating in this global marketplace is going to be very important. Another subject is with these emerging application areas, technical challenges that are also going to be coming to the fruition. We're going to, Frank had talked about this a moment ago, but as we are looking at hydrogen and derivatives, hydrogen energy carriers, ammonia, methanol, SAF, the intersection of the hydrogen sector and these other chemical industries is going to be really important. How do we fit in that space? How do we work together across these industry sectors is going to be important. Another big challenge that we're going to be facing is on pipelines and distribution and storage. As we are getting these large-scale efforts on hydrogen production and supply, how we store this hydrogen at large volumes and salt caverns and depleted oil and gas reservoirs, how do we get that hydrogen molecule where it's got to go from where it's produced is going to be a big factor. It's not enough to just emphasize or to incentivize the production landscape, but there is a whole distribution and connected tissue that has to be supported as well. And how we accomplish that is something that we're going to be tackling in the years ahead. Demand side support has been a common thread throughout the day today. We heard it on stage this morning and others. Hydrogen for aviation and heavy-duty transportation are going to be some very near-term applications that we're going to be looking at. near medium term. But how do we accomplish those? How do we incentivize and get these sectors off the ground is going to be important in working together. Industrial decarbonization has also been a very clear factor across a lot of discussions today. Hydrogen has huge opportunities for decarbonizing these heavy-duty industries of steel and cement and ammonia, but how we get it from this idea to a consolidated movement forward is going to be an important factor. Supply chain development is going to be another key activity. We are going to be seeing gigawatt-scale factories of electrolyzer systems and fuel cell manufacturing across the country, but with that is going to become supply chain constraints and needs for supporting the variety of these smaller components that the Department of Energy has put out critical supply chain reports identifying some key areas like gas diffusion layers, bipolar plates that need to have further support, domestic manufacturing. Finding ways to bridge those gaps is going to be a big factor, as well as access to critical minerals and materials. Finally, I just want to talk about the challenges on workforce development and environmental justice. That is going to be a very big issue for this sector moving forward. The intersection of hydrogen facilities and local communities is going to be something that needs to be actively discussed, and how we are able to build these facilities in ways that work with those local communities is a big factor, as well as having the workforce in place to support them. With an emerging industry with hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of jobs in the coming years, we need to make sure that we have a workforce that has certification schemes in place, that has university programs developed, and how we accomplish that together is going to be a big challenge moving forward. But we are very excited to meet these challenges head on and work together as a collective to do so. So identifying new factors and new policies is something that we do the best, and something that we're looking forward to moving forward on.
Yeah, I guess, Connie, you can just go to the close. In summary, this is a bit of a snapshot in 15 minutes for the world that we are in, but it's also your world. We are in it, and we're not going to be touching every possible one of those topics that comes up in the same degree, but you are at the cutting edge of actually trying to build facilities, trying to work within the framework of policies. And it's our job to see what we can do on behalf of our members and on behalf of industry to make sure that the pathways are opened up and there's clarity and priorities are given where needed. And because our ability to be successful as an association is a reflection of your own success and the growth of your industry. So hopefully that was informative in our about 15-minute snapshot of our life. And if you've got any questions for us, we're happy to take them. Sure.
Are there any success stories that you can share with us for this organization, just to explain further what you do in terms of advocacy to the members?
Sure. You want to take that, Connor? You can.
Sure. I think the biggest success story that we've had as a collective industry in the United States is the huge clean hydrogen programs and the bipartisan infrastructure law and the passage of the 45V tax credit. Those were our two biggest policy priorities of the last few years, and we are very proud of the success of getting that accomplished and creating all the conversations that are going on today.
Well, yeah, I'll take a step back from that as well, because over that 35 years, there's been a lot of little things. There's been the original investment tax credits for fuel cells. There's been the appropriations that have kept the Department of Energy funded. And I'm not trying to just simply self-promote, but because we were in many ways the only voice around in 2010, 2011, when the Department of Energy wanted to wipe out the hydrogen programs, our members and ourselves were some of the only people walking around Congress saying, hey, wait, there's more to be heard. So there's clearly a success that has allowed the existing Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technology Office to work from a platform instead of being zeroed out 10 years ago. But what Connor had pointed out about the IRA, and I can candidly, I took over 2 years ago, so this was a little bit before my time, but I can honestly say that the members of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association and my staff were heavily involved in the architecture of the IRA. We were at the table trying to work with Congress, trying to work with their members, the finance committees crafting, well, what should this look like? What should be included? What shouldn't be included? And there are many pieces that don't get put into legislation because they get left out. And if there aren't industry voices saying that's a good thing or that's a bad thing, the composite isn't really whole. So we can give you a list of more details, but I mean, the IRA has got a lot of fingerprints of membership in our association and people who cared about hydrogen wanting to see the opportunity of legislation move forward. There's a whole bunch of other little things that we can tag on, various line item appropriations, working on right now the implementation of tax credits for defining what is storage. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. that are yet to be fulfilled, but there's a history of 10 or 15 years of minor items that have helped build to where we are today.
I think we're about out of time. So
We're out of time, 25 seconds.
Thank
All
you very
right, well,
much.
thank you very much. Happy to talk to anybody outside.